Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's start the discussion and look at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 13 important topics for a detailed discussion so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. But before we start, I have a very important announcement for the beginners who are just starting their UPSC preparation. See, what we have noticed is that when aspirants start their preparation, they're not sure how to approach a particular subject, especially how to cover the basics of all the important subjects. So, to help and guide such aspirants, Unacademy is launching a special class festival for 3 days from 3rd November to the 5th of November. These special classes would be conducted on the Unacademy app, and all your top educators would be taking classes from different subjects, covering some of the basic topics and as well as few strategy sessions to help you prepare for the next examination. So, those interested, click on the link provided in the video description, download the Unacademy app, and enroll for the special class festival. You will not only be taught by the top educators in the country, you will get a chance to interact with them, raise your doubts, get your questions resolved, and participate in live interactive polls during the class. So, those interested, please enroll immediately. And if you want the PDF of the class, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code. After the session ends, the PDF would be shared over here. So, with this, let's get started and look at the first topic. On page number 6, there is a column written by Nirupama Rao. Now, who is Nirupama Rao? Nirupama Rao is a eminent personality, a very well-known individual in the country. She has been the Foreign Secretary of India. She has served the Indian Foreign Service with high honors and retired as the Foreign Secretary of the country, the topmost position for an Indian diplomat from the IFS. So, Nirupama Rao is offering her insight into the topic of maintaining peace and stability in the world. The former Foreign Secretary is talking about the conflicts that are raging around the world and how the United Nations, which is vested with this responsibility to maintain peace and stability, has failed in this particular objective. Now, this is a topic we have discussed several times in previous sessions as well. But Nirupama Rao provides a new solution. The article has something very unique, a very different insight, which you can directly include in your mains answers in a topic related to the UN reforms. See, we all understand that United Nations has been largely ineffective when it comes to maintaining peace and stability in the world. Look at all the ongoing conflicts or conflicts in the last 3 to 4 decades. In most of these conflicts, UN has largely been missing from action. It has been incapable, ineffective of resolving these conflicts and maintaining peace and stability. The reason why the UN keeps failing is because the very structure of the UN creates an elite club known as the UN Security Council that consists of 15 countries. And amongst these 15 countries, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, they are vested with the supreme power, the veto, through which they can veto any resolution which has the support of every other UN member. So, one permanent member can derail the resolution which is being backed and supported by the rest of the countries. So, this has led to the misuse of the veto and a clear division within the UNSC amongst the permanent members. With Western powers aligned on one side, US, UK, and France, their voting within the UNSC is always on the basis of their respective geopolitical interests to suit Western interests. On the other side, we have Russia and China that often collude together to push their geopolitical agenda. So, this politicization of UNSC has led to the derailment of UN's objective, which is to maintain peace and stability in the world. When the UN was established in 1945, under the UN Charter that serves as the constitution of the UN, the primary goal of this organization was to maintain peace and stability, prevent wars and conflicts. But the UN has failed in this objective because the very structure and composition of the UN and its bodies, it is outdated. It is stuck in the 1945 era, in the World War era. It does not reflect the current geopolitical realities. So UN has not been capable of any kind of proactive involvement in any ongoing conflict, be it the war in Ukraine or the Gaza conflict or the current escalation that US is carrying out against Venezuela or the crisis you see in Sudan where mass killings are being carried out by the rapid support forces, or if you take the civil war in Myanmar where the military junta has been committing brutal atrocities against civilians. In all these conflicts, the UN is largely missing, and even if it gets involved, it is incapable or ineffective of arriving at a solution. So that is the reason why some experts keep suggesting that UN should be reformed. This is India's position as well. India has been pushing to reform the UN for more than 30 years now. We have invested more than 3 decades of diplomatic capital to push for reforms of this outdated organization. So, whenever we talk of UN reforms, the idea is to expand the UN Security Council. The idea is to add new permanent members. For example, India itself is pushing for a permanent seat. We have even formed an informal alliance called the G4 with other contenders such as Brazil, Japan, and Germany. And these 4 countries, which believe that they deserve a table at the UNSC as a permanent member, they are pushing for expansion of the UNSC. They are pushing for a seat, a permanent seat at the high table. There are other countries, other regions pushing for such representation. And there is a call for overall structural reforms of the UN, the way in which the UN functions, how the organs of the UN interact. For example, the links between UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly. This has been up for debate, and there is a call to reform the very structure that governs the functioning of these organs of the UN. There is a call to reform the way in which UN peacekeeping forces are deployed, managed, and maintained by the UN Security Council. Because the peacekeeping forces, though they play an important role in maintaining peace and stability, but they don't have a political role to play. They largely maintain a ceasefire on the ground between 2 fighting factions, but they don't have a political involvement to arrive at a settlement. But the peacekeeping forces, they're mainly contributed by the troop contributing nations, countries like India and other developing, underdeveloped nations, African countries like Kenya, or Asian countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Philippines. These are the major troop contributing countries. India has contributed more than 2 lakh personnel for several UN peacekeeping missions over the last 70 years. But despite this, the troop contributing countries, they have no decision making powers. The deployment of the peacekeeping missions, their safety, the accountability is entirely handled by UNSC. That is essentially the P5 countries. They decide on the management of the UN peacekeeping forces and the peacekeeping missions. So there's absolutely no role for the troop contributing countries. So there is a call to reform this, provide a decision making role for the troop contributing countries as well. So generally, when we say UN reforms, this is what it means. But however, the writer Nirupama Rao correctly points out that this process is futile. This is not going to yield any results. Why? Because the P5 countries would never genuinely allow the UN to be reformed. See, the irony is for UN to be reformed, the proposal will finally require the approval of the UN Security Council itself. If, let's say, new permanent members have to be added. let's say the structure, the processes governing UN have to be updated, then such a resolution will have to be approved by UN General Assembly, which has universal membership of all 193 countries in the world, and it has to be approved by UN Security Council, the elite club of 15 countries. Now imagine a scenario where a resolution for reforming the UN has been pushed and it has been supported at the UNGA with a special majority. Let's assume 170 countries out of 193 are supporting it. Now the resolution comes to UN Security Council. Let's say 14 out of these 15 countries are supporting this resolution to reform the UN. Then even after that, just one P5 member can use their veto to defeat that resolution. So are you understanding the power balance that exists at the UN? Let's say a resolution to reform the UN has been passed by the UNGA with special majority. Let's assume 170 countries are supporting it. Then within the UNSC, 14 out of 15 members are supporting it. Despite that, one country with a veto can defeat that entire resolution. So these P5 countries have a vested interest to not allow for reforms of the UN. They don't want to share that power, that space with other countries. So Nirupama Rao points out that it is futile to push for reforms of the UN. There's no point, it's unlikely to happen. Even if it happens, it will not suit the current geopolitical realities. India, as I said, has been investing a lot of diplomatic capital and effort for more than 30 years now to carry out UN reforms, but not even a single change has taken place till now. That is why the writer has a different suggestion. The writer has a different suggestion. If peace and stability has to be maintained in the world, if wars and conflicts have to be dealt with more effectively through the UN, the writer is proposing the idea of establishing a new subsidiary body under the United Nations itself. See, UN reforms can be a separate agenda in itself. But as of now, since the priority is to end wars and conflicts, prevent future wars and conflicts, the writer is suggesting that how about establishing a new subsidiary body, a board, an international board for peace and sustainable security. So there is a provision in the UN Charter under Article 22. Article 22 of the UN Charter, it empowers the UN General Assembly to establish new subsidiary bodies within the United Nations. Currently, there are several such subsidiary bodies which have been set up with a specialized role and task which is assigned to it. So, in a similar manner, the writer is suggesting that by invoking the provisions of Article 22 of the UN Charter, the General Assembly can provide for the establishment of a new subsidiary body, a board for peace and sustainable security. Now, such a board, it will not override the existing powers of the UN Security Council. As of now, the UNSC is indeed the supreme organ of the UN. So, without disturbing the existing structure, the writer is suggesting that a new body can be set up which can actually work effectively to resolve wars and conflicts. This body will be structured in such a way that it will not override the UNSC. It doesn't seek to replace the UNSC. More importantly, it will not have any effect on the sovereignty of other countries. See, one reason why countries resist any kind of outside interference from the UN is because it is seen as an assault on their sovereignty. Now imagine there's a crisis between India and Pakistan. If UN were to intervene, what does India say? What is India's position? India says there is no scope for third party involvement. The reason is any UN involvement is seen as an external outside interference because right now the UN is vulnerable for manipulation by the P5. So countries see this as a violation of their sovereignty. But what if there is a guarantee provided that this subsidiary body will not interfere with your sovereignty? What if a guarantee is provided that it will have no direct powers of intervention? Meaning it can't authorize the use of force to invade a country. It can't directly play a role in the ongoing conflict. So, if such guarantees are given, and if a clear, specific mandate is assigned to it, then such a sustainable peace and security board can achieve the unthinkable, where the UN can work effectively to bring the fighting sides together. It could be two countries or it could be two factions within a country. Such a body can work together to find a political solution. Right now, the problem is the UN doesn't engage with the fighting sides for a long time. You take Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Hamas. UN, though it has tried to intervene, it has not maintained a proactive engagement with them to drive a political solution. But such a body which has a good composition, which has representation from around the world, could possibly work towards an effective solution to bring such conflicts to an end. So there will be a guarantee that it will not interfere with the sovereignty of the nations. It will not override the existing UNSC or replace the UNSC. UNSC will still be the supreme body when it comes to maintaining international peace and security. It will not overstep on the jurisdiction of the UNSC. It will not interfere with the functioning of the UN Secretary General. So it will have an independent domain of its own with a clearly specified mandate to work with all the parties involved in a war, to bring them to the negotiating table, to encourage talks, to find a political settlement, and encourage a dialogue amongst the stakeholders. So, what should be the composition of such a new subsidiary body? Which country should be part of it? This is the most important question. What should be the structure? What should be the composition? Nirupama Rao says such a body will only have legitimacy when it has broad representation. But at the same time, it can't become an elite club. You can't create another UNSC of sorts. It should not be an elite club of 5 countries or 4 countries or 6 countries. And at the same time, it can't be open for all. Then what's the point of it? If you have all 193 countries, then consensus will never be arrived at. Decision making will become more problematic when you have a lot of countries. The writer says the ideal composition would be approximately around 24 countries, anywhere between 20 to 24 countries representing different regions. There could be all the big powers. Of course, the P5 will need representation on such a board, representation for all the important middle powers from India to Indonesia to Turkey and others, the middle powers, which are part of G20, let's say. All the G20 countries could be a part of it. Then there should be representation from different regions, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America, the small countries, the global south. They would need representation as well. Maybe there can be representation for regional groups. If each individual country can't be represented, regional organizations can be given membership. Because usually at the UN, regional organizations, they act as observers. But the writer is suggesting, how about including regional organizations as a member? For example, including SARC as a member, including African Union as a member, so that the entire region has a representation and almost every major country in that region has a stake, has a direct role to play in resolving wars and conflicts. Because in today's interconnected world, conflicts are also interconnected. And conflicts can't be ended through negotiations involving only Washington or London or Moscow or Beijing. Even other global capitals play a role, from New Delhi to Jakarta to Brasilia. So, such a broad and widespread representation and keeping it as limited as possible, let's say around approximately 24 members, with a mix of big powers, middle countries, global south representation, and some regional organizations. This would provide for a more acceptable framework. And the commitment is that it will not interfere with the sovereignty of any nation. It will not have any intervention powers in an ongoing conflict. It will only engage in talks with all the sides, with all the stakeholders. It will encourage a political dialogue to arrive at a settlement to end the conflict. The writer believes that such a body can have a real impact. So this is an idea that you can include in your answers because UN reforms has been stalled from a long time. It's almost like a dead end. So UPSC might ask you, what other suggestions can you provide to make the UN effective to end wars and conflicts? So you need to anticipate such questions and prepare for them. So let's look at this practice question. The United Nations must create a new institution that can sustain peace beyond war. Examine the statement and suggest a possible way forward. Now, this question is slightly unique. Why? Because it is asking you to not just discuss and examine this topic, but you should also suggest a possible way forward, suggest a solution. The topic here is, of course, the role of UN in dealing with wars and conflicts. What happens beyond war? That is, during a conflict and post conflict. Post conflict, there will be reconstruction, there will be rehabilitation efforts involved to protect the affected population. Don't you think such a body can play a role in the post war efforts as well? Don't you think such a body can be very effective during the war to bring the conflict to an end? So, this is the focus of this question here. So, what you should do is in the introduction, you should first highlight how the UN has been ineffective in maintaining peace and stability. This has to be your opening statement that the United Nations has failed in its objective to uphold peace and stability. UN reforms has been stalled for many years. It is at a dead end. You can't sit and hope for UN to be reformed because it's not happening anytime soon. That's the reason why you will suggest a solution. The suggestion would be the establishment of a new subsidiary body. So you will set the tone for the answer. You don't have to provide the details here. You don't have to explain everything here. It's just the introduction where you're pointing out that UN has been ineffective until now. UN reforms are stalled. It's at a dead end. So what we need is a new solution, an innovative approach. Then in the body, discuss all the details, break down this argument. Talk about the reasons for the failure of the United Nations. One paragraph, maybe 3, 4 points, highlighting why the UN has been ineffective as of now. Next, discuss why UN reforms may not be the solution. Why UN reforms have been stalled for so many decades. Why is the reform of the United Nations not happening? So then present your way forward. The way forward is to probably think of a new subsidiary body which has a well defined role, a clearly defined mandate, with a broad composition representing most of the world. So it need not be a universal body, but it can ensure equitable geographical representation. It can ensure representation for different powers, from big powers to the weakest of the countries. It can have representation for regional groups and point out that this body will not interfere with the country's sovereignty. It will not have any interventionist powers. It will not replace the UNSC. It can work alongside the UN Security Council and the UN Secretary General, coordinate with these two important institutions, and drive a political solution for every conflict in the world. So, this can be a solution to quickly and effectively end conflicts and maintain peace and stability. So, present that solution, and that can be your conclusion as well. So, I'm hoping the discussion of answer writing approach has been useful to all of you. And if you're benefiting from it, please let me know in the comments so we can continue with this on a regular basis. Now, let's move to the next topic. Yesterday, we spoke about Trump's shocking announcement that the US will be resuming nuclear testing. I pointed out as to why exactly the US has taken this decision. Recently, Russia has been scaling up nuclear tensions. Each day, we are pushing the world towards a potential nuclear arms race and the possibility of a larger nuclear conflict. Especially in the last few years, the arms reduction treaties they have basically fallen down. They've fallen apart. There is a contest which has opened up, a trilateral contest of sorts between the three major powers, Russia, USA, and China. So the current developments involving these three big global powers is quite concerning, quite alarming. Russia has blatantly threatened nuclear aggression against Ukraine multiple times in the ongoing war. Russia has recently tested advanced nuclear delivery platforms and nuclear weapon systems. Yesterday, I was mentioning the nuclear powered torpedo, the Poseidon, which Russia has recently tested. Russia has also tested a nuclear powered cruise missile, the Burnestvik. So, the testing of such new forms of nuclear delivery systems, it has raised alarms across the world. China, as you all know, has been expanding its nuclear arsenal. It has adopted a very aggressive military diplomatic posture when it comes to its territorial conflicts with the neighbors. And United States under Donald Trump has been very volatile. And we have seen how Trump is a reactive leader. So this is pushing the world dangerously close to the brink of a domino effect, an unstoppable domino effect, which could lead to a nuclear arms race. And one miscalculation could easily escalate into a nuclear conflict. In fact, there is a indicator of the nuclear risk the world faces. It's referred to as the doomsday clock. The doomsday clock basically tells you how close the world is to a potential nuclear apocalypse. Right now, the doomsday clock is at 89 seconds. So the risk is growing for a nuclear escalation, a nuclear catastrophe. And in the midst of this, Donald Trump has ordered the immediate resumption of nuclear testing. So, what does this mean for nuclear arms control? How can stability be maintained in the world? How can a nuclear arms race be prevented? That is what we need to learn from this article. See, the United States carried out its last nuclear test in 1992. After this, the CTBT convention was pushed around the world, the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Though US is a signatory, even Russia, China, they have signed the CTBT. But none of these nuclear powers have ratified the CTBT. They have not ratified it. So CTBT never came into force. It never came into effect. But despite that, there was a global convention of sorts, a gentleman's agreement of sorts, that no country would carry out further nuclear weapon testing. A moratorium, a self imposed moratorium by all the nuclear powers. The 98 nuclear tests by India, Pakistan were the last major nuclear tests. Of course, there is North Korea, the rogue state, which has continued with nuclear testing after that. But North Korea is the exception here. Now, if you exclude North Korea for a second, the nuclear testing by India, Pakistan in 98 were the last major nuclear tests. North Korea, yes, it has been a rogue state. It has carried out nuclear tests after that as well. But the point is, after 1990s, across the world, there is a moratorium on nuclear testing. India has never tested weapons after that. Neither has Pakistan, nor have the other nuclear weapon states, except for North Korea, of course. Now, the point is, if this moratorium is broken, let's say, as announced by Donald Trump, US will fast track the testing of its nuclear weapons. It will take at least a few months to prepare for a nuclear test, roughly anywhere between 12 to 30 months. So let's say in the next 1.5 or 2 years, we see a nuclear test by the US. That would be immediately met with counter testing by Russia and China. Russia has been testing delivery platforms like the Poseidon and the Burnestvik missile and the hypersonic delivery systems. But Russia has not carried out nuclear testing of the weapons itself. Neither has China. All these major powers have a moratorium. They have been having a self-imposed restraint on further nuclear testing. But if the US were to break this moratorium, it would be met with counter tests by Russia and China. Now, don't you think if China were to test nuclear weapons, that would push India to the edge? It would push India itself to conduct its own nuclear tests. Now, don't you think this would push Pakistan to the edge and conduct its own nuclear tests, leading to large scale destabilization across the region? Now, Israel is another country which is believed to possess nuclear weapons. Though it has never announced it, though it has never carried out public testing, it is well known that Israel does possess nuclear weapons. That is what leads Iran to pursue an illegal nuclear weapons program to counter Israel. Now, don't you think the nuclear rivalries here in West Asia would accelerate as well? So, this could lead to an unintended chain reaction, a domino effect, where testing by one country will trigger tests by other countries. And this will only bring the world closer to the brink of a bigger nuclear conflict. This could undermine the Non Proliferation Treaty, the NPT, which basically recognize the nuclear weapon states, that is the P5 countries. Only those countries which had tested weapons before 1967, only they are recognized as official nuclear weapon states, which is the P5. All the other countries, if they have to sign NPT, they have to commit to never develop and procure nuclear weapons. They will be the non-nuclear weapon states. And they will receive assistance in civilian nuclear technology. The focus was on preventing the spread of nuclear weapons technology. So, given how NPT is discriminatory in nature, India has rejected signing the NPT. India will never sign the NPT because signing the NPT would mean India will have to basically surrender and shut down its weapons program. Because we didn't have weapons before 67 as per the terms of the treaty. Only P5 countries had it. India's argument was we always support nuclear disarmament. India has been one of the leading powers pushing for nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. But if China, which is a real threat for India, with whom we have a standing border dispute, with whom we have fought a war, if China has nuclear weapons, for India it's a strategic necessity to have a nuclear deterrence. So this pushes Pakistan to have the same stand. So Pakistan also has never signed NPT, just like India. So India has never signed CTBT as well. India has retained the right to test nuclear weapons if at all, if necessary. But we also have a self-imposed moratorium on nuclear testing. India is not an irresponsible power. We have had a very responsible nuclear program. Though we have not signed NPT and CTBT, we have not carried out further tests after 98. So this restraint by India and the nuclear doctrine of India, which provides for the no first use policy, India has made it clear that it would not be the first country to deploy nuclear weapons. This guarantee from India has maintained that balance in the subcontinent, in the South Asia region, without triggering an arms race involving Pakistan and China. So even if one country were to break that balance, it will trigger a chain reaction that will have a global effect with global consequences. The real concern is the arms reduction treaties. They are becoming outdated in the recent years. As we discussed yesterday, Mr. Donald Trump, the master of quitting agreements and treaties, he pulled out US from the INF, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which had maintained a sense of arms control between US and Russia. Trump's argument was China is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal. China is the most serious threat for the US. Based on this argument, Trump withdrew US from the INF, which has pushed Russia to the edge. So it's not Russia's fault to begin with. It was United States which triggered this chain reaction by exiting the INF. Now, the other arms reduction treaties like the START, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, has expired, which had constrained both US and Russia to limit their nuclear delivery systems and warheads within reasonable limits. The current treaty, which is in effect, is the new START, the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, and this is expiring next year, 2026. Russia has already announced that it will not abide by these restrictions anymore following the tensions between US and Russia, and Putin has said Russia will not renegotiate the START treaty. And I'm sure you can guess what Trump would have to say about this. So if the arms reduction treaties between US Russia were to collapse completely, by next year, if New START is not renewed or if a new arms reduction treaty is not negotiated between US and Russia, This could lead to expansion of the nuclear arsenal and delivery systems of these two big nuclear powers. Between them, they have easily more than 15,000 warheads, which is more than enough to decimate the entire planet. So if they were to break the arms reduction treaties, it will trigger a chain reaction, pushing China, then India, then Pakistan, and of course, UK and France, then Israel and North Korea, then Iran, and others to pursue the expansion of nuclear weapons. That is why the writer has a note of warning, a caution. The writer is suggesting, how about a global no first use policy based on India's principle? How about pushing the world towards adopting a global no first use policy? Because, see, today, you may not see the actual deployment of a large nuclear warhead in an actual battle. Nuclear weapons are largely strategic weapons meant mainly for deterrence. Unless you have some really crazy leadership, you would not see the deployment of nuclear weapons in the battlefield. But however, there is a concern. Of late, there is a new type of nuclear weapon systems that have been developed, the tactical battlefield nukes. Now, these are nuclear weapons with a smaller warhead, with a smaller yield, which can be actually deployed in the battlefield. Now, imagine in the Russia Ukraine war, if Russia were to deploy tactical nukes targeting Ukrainian forces, or in the context of an India Pakistan clash like Operation Sindoor, if Pakistan is suffering a defeat and on the back foot against India, what if the crazy Pakistani army leadership decides to deploy tactical nukes against Indian forces in the battlefield? This is where the highest risk of escalation exists today. Countries may not easily trigger a nuclear war using the strategic deterrent weapons they have, which can take out entire cities, like it did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But what is a more real possibility today is the deployment of tactical battlefield nukes, which could then escalate into a nuclear apocalypse. The writer says today the world is heading towards a greater nuclear risk because we have a leadership around the world which has not lived through the horrors of World War II, right? Leaders like Trump, leaders like Putin, leaders like Xi Jinping, they are disconnected from the horrors of a nuclear war. The world is dangerously moving, slipping, and inching towards this scenario, which is quite alarming. And that's the reason why the writer is suggesting that what if countries come out with a global no first use policy, a guarantee that no country would use nuclear weapons in the first go, meaning nuclear weapons are only for deterrence, only for a second strike if someone else has attacked you with nuclear weapons. So this could bring some sense of balance, and then maybe you can try to revive the NPT, CTBT, and the arms reduction treaties which are there to create a world which is safer. But eventual goal has to be towards nuclear disarmament. That has been India's goal as well. Did you know India has championed a plan at the United Nations for nuclear disarmament? Unfortunately, it does not have enough support. India had proposed back in 1980s a very fair disarmament process so that every nuclear power would disarm parallelly, simultaneously to get rid of nuclear weapons forever. Now, can you guess what's the name of this disarmament plan pushed by India? Can you mention that in the comments? This nuclear disarmament plan, which was conceived by India, pushed by India at the UN. Can you please read about this? I'm giving a hint. It's in the 1980s that India pushed this. It never had enough global support. So you do need something of that sort eventually to disarm the world and to get rid of nuclear weapons. But since this is too idealistic to hope for, too unrealistic to believe that it's going to happen, the best we can hope is for revival of NPT, because next year in 2026, NPT is up for a renewal. So maybe there can be a more healthy, balanced argument and debate amongst the nuclear states to ensure non-proliferation treaty is renewed and updated. CTBT, trying to bring the CTBT into force and renewing the arms reduction treaties, especially between US and Russia. So writer is also saying that it's not just enough for US Russia to be part of an arms reduction treaty. Today, you need China also to be a part of it, given that the primary rivalries are between US and China. Maybe a trilateral arms reduction treaty that will limit the nuclear stockpiling, the number of nuclear warheads and delivery systems of US, Russia, and China. So if these three maintain the caps as per the arms reduction treaties, then it will trickle down to India, Pakistan, UK, France, and the others as well. So a trilateral arms reduction treaty is something you can suggest as well in your answers. You can suggest the global no first use policy being implemented at the global level, then upgradation of NPT and CTBT, trying to bring them into actual force and effect, and arms reduction treaties, a trilateral treaty, particularly between US, Russia, and China. These are the possible solutions, diplomatic solutions, which can try to prevent a larger nuclear arms race. Now, please take up this mains question for your answer writing practice. Coming to the next article, there is an editorial on page number 6. This article is focused on the trade wars between US and China. As you all know, President Trump had levied 57% tariffs on China. And this is nothing new. The tariff war of US against China goes back to Trump's first presidency between 2016 and 2020. Even then, Trump had levied several tariffs targeting the Chinese economy. See, Trump's argument is that China's monopoly in supplying several goods, China's control over supply chains, over key materials, key resources, is what gives it a dominating position even over the economy of the United States. That's what worries the US. The US registers a huge trade deficit against China, as China is the one of the key suppliers of several high technology goods, commodities, intermediary products. The US economy is heavily dependent on Chinese imports. So, to reduce this dependency and to take away that leverage China has against the US economy, Trump believes that levying tariffs is the way out of this. But just the other day, Trump met with Xi Jinping at the uh, APEC Summit in South Korea. Right? We discussed this topic yesterday. There appears to be some sort of a normalization between US China, at least in the trade domain. These tariffs have been reduced to 47%. The penalty that US had levied to punish China for enabling fentanyl production. Fentanyl is a deadly opioid leading to thousands of deaths in the US because of drug addiction. So US under Trump has accused China of supplying the chemicals and raw materials to drug cartels who produce fentanyl and traffic this into the US. So for that, US had levied a 20% tariff, a penalty on China. So this has been reduced from 20 to 10%. So the effective tariffs now are at 47%. So this is a slight concession Trump has given to China. In return, China has also offered some trade concessions. China has promised to step up its agri imports from the US, especially procurement of soybean, which will benefit American farmers. By the way, American farmers are the key vote base of Donald Trump. China had retaliated against Trump's tariffs by boycotting the agri products of the US and by banning the import of soybean from the US. Now, China has offered to resume the import of soybeans. China had placed export restrictions on critical minerals. As China has a dominating control over supply chains of critical minerals, it had placed a restriction on US accessing critical mineral supply chains controlled by China. So now China has agreed to relax these restrictions. So some normalization is being seen between them. But the point the editorial is making is that why US China are so hostile when it comes to the trade relationship today. See, this has to do with the fact that US feels insecure about China's dominant position in global trade. You can't deny the fact that China has engineered an economic marvel, an economic revolution in the last 40 years, in the last 4 decades. Today, it is the global factory for most important sectors, goods, commodities. China is indeed the factory of the world. There's no denying that. And also, there's no denying the fact that US remains the world's largest consumer market. Now, how can the world's largest producer not engage with the world's largest consumer? They can't stay away from each other. It's a toxic relationship, but they have to be with each other. That's how it works. See, for Trump, levying tariffs, trying to reduce the trade deficit, it's more of politics and optics than actual economic logic. Because tariffs will hurt American consumers as the cost of imports will go up. In order to reduce the trade deficit, what US has done, it has tried diversifying the imports. It has tried moving away from China. US has relied on a concept known as friend shoring, what we also call as near shoring. Friend shoring refers to sourcing key products and commodities and technologies and materials from your friends and allies so that you can trust them, you can depend on them, and you don't give any unfair leverage and advantage to your adversaries and enemies. Near shoring refers to sourcing essential goods, commodities, materials from countries that are close by geographically so that you don't have to depend on global supply chains. It'll reduce the transportation time. It'll make it more secure against geopolitical risks. So US has focused on friend shoring and near shoring. It is sourcing more from close partners like Philippines, Vietnam, from Mexico, from Europe, from Canada. So this has been the American approach to reduce its dependency on Chinese imports. But inevitably, US will have to rely on China and China will have to rely on US. It works both ways. It's vice versa. The writer says, the editorial essentially, it says that, see, China is able to dominate the global economy today, not just because it dominates few sectors. We all know China is a leading power when it comes to, let's say, electronics or semiconductors or power and mobile equipment. But it's not just few sectors that China is dominating. You know what China has done? Since 1980s, since it opened up its economy, it liberalized itself, adopted capitalism, and attracted foreign capital and foreign investments. It has engineered decadal plans. China plans for decades, not for years, not for months. In United States, for example, planning cycle is a 4-year cycle that aligns with the presidential election cycle. In US, politics has become so divisive. It's all about winning elections between Democrats and Republicans. So planning in the US has been reduced to a 4-year cycle where the political focus is entirely on winning elections the next time. But that's not China's approach. China's approach is long term. One reason why China has achieved such a tremendous transformation is because it has planned for decades, it has planned for 30, 40, 50 years ahead. So such plans are more sustainable. And China not only dominates one or two sectors, it's not only dominating few parts of the global economy, it actually controls the key levers of the global economy. You know what are the three key levers of the global economy? Today, there are three key levers which will turn and function the global economy itself. One is intermediaries. What are intermediaries? The intermediate goods, components, raw materials, which are used to produce the finished goods. Now, take drugs, for example, pharmaceutical products. We say India is the pharmacy of the world. India produces the largest number of generic drugs and vaccines in the world, right? So India is believed to have the dominating position in pharmaceuticals. But in reality, we are dependent on China. Why? Because the intermediary for producing your drugs, the APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, who produces that? It's largely China. Almost 60% of APIs used by Indian pharma comes from China itself. So we are simply taking those intermediaries and raw materials from China, then producing the drugs. Without China giving APIs to India, India's pharma will collapse. This is the masterstroke of Chinese planning. They control all the key intermediaries in today's world, from active pharmaceutical ingredients to critical minerals and rare earths, which are crucial in today's industry. China has a dominating control over the mining, processing, refining, and distribution of critical minerals, strategic minerals, and rare earths. And the second thing that China has done is pioneered high end technology, from artificial intelligence to 5G, 6G networks, quantum computing, space research, biomedicine. In every sector, China has pushed high end research innovation. Today, it controls a lot of intellectual property through the patents its researchers have generated. This was possible because of China's decadal planning, where it has pushed massive amounts of money into universities, into academia, research institutions. So China doesn't dominate few sectors. It actually has control over these three. These three are the levers of the global economy today. China controls most of the intermediaries. It has high-end technology through which it can control the world. Look at all your 3G, 4G networks across the world. It's all controlled by Chinese companies like Huawei, ZTE Telecom, and the others. Then look at power sector. Most of the transformers that are used in your power grids, China produces them. So same with critical minerals, rare earths. China has that control over the entire supply chain. This is the reason why China has the dominating control over every economy. China not only has a robust domestic manufacturing through its SEZ model, special economic zone model, where it has become the global factory, but externally as well, it controls these key ingredients which are needed for any country's economy. So US can never escape this. That's why experts believe no country can escape the Chinese domination. One thing countries have to learn is to work with China. Instead of antagonizing China, working with China is the only way out. Now, China also can't ignore countries like US or even India for that matter. China eventually needs markets because, see, in such a tariff environment, even China will take a hit. For example, China's industrial hubs in Guangdong, they have suffered heavily because of American tariffs and the trade war. Several manufacturers of electronic goods, mobile phones, etc., they have taken a hit as manufacturing has suffered in China as well. So China has been balancing its domestic production and external control of the global economy. Now China needs big markets like US, Europe, India, of course. That's the leverage other countries have, the consumers have. So in today's world, instead of pitting one against the other, instead of seeing the other as a rival, it's better to work together. US can't do it without China. China can't do it without the US. That's the reality, the hard economic truth. That is the point the editorial is trying to drive. Now, coming to the last major article before we head towards the small topics. On page 6, there's another editorial that highlights the importance of consent. See, recently in France, there was a horrific rape case that came to light. I'm sure many of you must be familiar with this particular case. Giselle Pellicot, a French woman, came out in public and sued her husband of enabling the rape of his own wife. For many, many years, Giselle Pellicot's husband used to drug her, used to keep her drugged and intoxicated all the time to knock her out of her senses. And he would basically allow his friends, relatives, family members, even strangers to rape his wife and take money from them. Now, this was sexual exploitation of his own wife without her consent, which accounts for the horrific crime of rape. Now, what is unfortunate is that in French law, in French criminal jurisprudence, the concept of consent in the context of rape was not well defined before this particular case. Though France is a very liberal, progressive nation, the concept of consent was not codified into criminal law in the context of rape. But following this case and the brave fight of Giselle Pellicot and the support she got from women, finally, France has codified the idea of consent into criminal laws that punish rape as a horrific criminal offense. So, this article is highlighting the importance of consent, how it is important for the society to uphold and protect the sexual autonomy, bodily autonomy of women. The article is also focusing on how to protect the survivors of rape, how to ensure justice is secured to them. So, in India as well, the concept of consent, though legally it's recognized, it's not often seen in practice. You might have seen movies like Pink, which highlight the issue of consent, how even in courts, in the media, The victims are often targeted. There's a lot of stigma which is present around rape. Victims are judged for their dressing, for their looks, for their previous behavior, and somehow it is used as an argument to justify the horrific rape that has happened. You have seen the statements coming from our patriarchal leaders who end up blaming the victims. So, this culture has to change, this mindset. This has to completely change, along with upholding the idea of consent in a sexual relationship. So, if consent is not prioritized, if no, when no is not given that legal value and precedence, the victims of sexual violence will never be able to secure justice as they are stigmatized, judged by the society, by the lawyers, by the judges, right? So the patriarchal mindset is what needs to change as well. And there needs to be victim protection. Protect the survivors of rape, help them deal with the trauma. Because, see, right now, if you look at conviction rates in India, it's quite alarming. Though India has very strict laws against rape and strict punishment, particularly after the Nirbhaya gang rape incident, the Justice Verma Committee came out with stringent recommendations to reform the criminal laws. Today, rape can carry a death penalty as well. But despite the legal changes, it does not mean anything for the victim unless and until conviction is achieved. You know what are the conviction rates in India? It is a shocking 27 to 28%. The data is from 2018 to 2022 based on the records of NCRB, the National Crime Records Bureau. NCRB data shows that during this 4-year period, out of all the rape cases that were registered, conviction has been achieved only in 27 to 28% of the cases, less than one third of the cases. What does this show? This shows the incompetence of the police, of the investigating agencies, meaning they are not investigating properly. It shows the ineffectiveness of the prosecution. It also highlights the societal bias which could be present and which could be playing a role in the low conviction rates. Today, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita recognizes the idea of criminal assault and criminal offense. Despite this, conviction rates are so low, and this has to do with the lack of protection that women have in general. So it's not just about codifying the laws, recognizing the idea of consent, providing for strict punishment. It's about reforming the society, protecting the victims, not targeting the victims and judging them. These are the changes that are needed in a society to protect women from acts of sexual violence. So it's a lesson that you can take from the incident in France. And that's the highlight of this particular editorial. Now, moving on, India, US have signed a very, very important defense agreement. They have signed a 10-year framework. A 10-year framework has been signed between the two countries. The US India Major Defense Partnership Framework. So, this is a big development again, because even though there is a friction between India and US right now because of the tariff wars and the statements of Donald Trump, in the defense domain, our relations are progressing pretty well. This 10-year framework agreement was signed during the ADMM-Plus meeting, which was hosted by Malaysia. So, India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh was in Malaysia to participate in the ADMM-Plus meeting. And during this occasion, the Secretary of War of the Trump administration, Pete Hegseth, negotiated with India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh, and they have signed a 10-year framework, the US India Major Defense Partnership. So, this will cement the interoperability between the armed forces of both the countries. Both countries will work together to counter common threats, to share information, and as well as build collaboration between their defense industries, especially in the field of advanced technologies. There's a lot of close industrial collaboration happening today between defense companies, private startups, and even public sector research organizations. So, this defense collaboration will be taken forward over a 10-year period under this framework on major defense partnership. So this is a follow-up to the compact which was announced earlier this year during PM Modi's visit to the US. When PM Modi met with Donald Trump, the compact initiative was launched, catalyzing opportunities for military partnership, accelerated commerce and technology. So this is an initiative between the Indian and American defense industry to drive greater collaboration. So such initiatives will receive a greater boost through the 10-year framework which has been created. Now, what is ADMM Plus? This is very, very important for your prelims. Let's cover this fact as well. Let's not leave anything. ADMM Plus stands for ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus. See, every year, ASEAN countries have a summit, right? ASEAN Summit will take place. Along with that, parallelly, there are other summits and meetings which are also held. For example, there is the East Asia Summit. East Asia Summit is a much larger group. It not only includes the ASEAN member countries, the dialogue partners of ASEAN are also included. ASEAN has given the status of a dialogue partner to some of the closest countries, such as Australia, China, India, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Russia, US. These are some of the dialogue partners of ASEAN group. So ASEAN holds the East Asia Summit with these 8 dialogue partners to focus on economic ties and overall cooperative relations between them. Then ASEAN holds individual summits with each country, like India ASEAN Summit will take place, China ASEAN Summit, US ASEAN Summit will also take place. Apart from these important summits, the ADMM and ADMM Plus, these meetings also take place. What is ADMM? ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting, where the defense ministers of ASEAN meet. Until recently, ASEAN had 10 countries before East Timor was added. So the 10 defense ministers of ASEAN would meet to discuss the security issues of Southeast Asia. Right? So now there will be a 11th defense minister after the addition of the new member, Timor-Leste or East Timor. Now, after the defense ministers meeting of ASEAN countries, they invite the 8 dialogue partners and their defense ministers to attend the ADMM Plus meeting. So 18 countries participate in this. Exactly the same as East Asia Summit. In East Asia Summit, the interaction is at the leadership level, where prime ministers, presidents, head of states, head of governments are participating. In ADMM Plus, it's the defense ministers who are participating. So 10 ASEAN countries plus the 8 dialogue partners: India, Australia, China, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Russia, and US. This is your ADMM Plus. It started out in 2010. It was started in the year 2010, ADMM Plus meetings. Initially, it was held biennially, once in 2 years. But since 2017, it's being held annually, every year. So ADMM Plus focuses on the security defense issues of the entire Indo-Pacific, because it has representation of all the big powers of the Indo-Pacific. It focuses on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief or disaster management cooperation. It focuses on counter-terrorism. It focuses on maritime security, piracy. It focuses on countering organized crime, such as drug trafficking, arms trafficking, etc. These are the priority issues that are dealt with by the ADMM Plus. Next, there's an article related to the APEC Summit, which was hosted by South Korea. The article is not important for us. It only refers to the statements made by Xi Jinping. But we should understand what is APEC. Usually, APEC meeting takes place immediately after the ASEAN and East Asia Summit. So what is this APEC? Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. It's a multilateral organization and a free trade agreement between 21 major economies of the Pacific region. It mainly includes the rim countries, the littorals of the Pacific, from North America, South America, and Southeast and East Asia. So there are 21 countries which are part of the APEC, which is a very, very important grouping of the Indo-Pacific. And They have a free trade agreement between them. This group represents nearly 40% of the global population. This group accounts for more than 50% of the global goods production and consumption. It has many major economies. So please note down which are the member countries of APEC. All major countries like Russia, China, South Korea, Japan, then even China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong are participants, though they are seen as part of China's sovereignty. They are not full time members, but they are participants in the APEC. Then you have Southeast Asian countries: Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, then, of course, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, US, Canada, Peru, and Chile, then Brunei and Papua New Guinea. All these countries are part of the APEC. Now, can you read about India's status with the APEC? Can you tell me, is India a member or not? And if not, what is India's status with the APEC? Where do we stand on the APEC? And what is our position in the APEC? So please find this out and mention that in the comments below. Now, coming to the prelim section, let's quickly wrap up the session for today. On the front page and also on page number 8, there's an article referring to the Kartarpur Corridor. So let's understand what is the Kartarpur Corridor. But first, why the topic is in news. See, recently, Pakistan has started issuing visas. Pakistan has been issuing visas for Sikh pilgrims to visit important pilgrimage sites located in Pakistan. As you all know, during partition, when Punjab was divided, several important Sikh pilgrimage sites have been left behind on the other side of the border in the Punjab province of Pakistan. So, the birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev is fast approaching, the founding father of Sikhism. There are important sacred pilgrimage sites in Pakistan which Sikh pilgrims would like to visit. Because of Pahalgam terror attack and Operation Sindoor, our ties had completely broken down. As you're aware, India had stopped all people-to-people interaction. We had stopped issuing visas to Pakistani nationals. We even kicked out all the Pakistani nationals, and we weren't allowing Indians to travel to Pakistan as well. Right? Even Pakistan had suspended issuing visas to Indians. So now Pakistan has restarted issuing visas to Sikh pilgrims. Initially, the government had blocked the travel of these Indians, these Sikh pilgrims to Pakistan, but now the center has reversed the decision. It was MHA which had blocked the travel of Indian Sikh pilgrims who had Pakistani visas. But now, with the intervention of Ministry of External Affairs, this block has been reversed, meaning Sikh pilgrims with Pakistani visas can now travel to Pakistan. Now, this brings up the topic of Kartarpur Corridor. What is Kartarpur Corridor? See, in Pakistan, in Kartarpur, there is a very sacred Gurudwara, Gurudwara Darbar Sahib, located near Narowal. This is believed to be the site where Guru Nanak Dev reportedly spent his last days before he passed away. And you have the Ravi River here, and across the Ravi, you have Gurdaspur district, which is the border district in India today. And we have another sacred Gurudwara, Dera Baba Nanak. Both these shrines are very closely linked with the life of Guru Nanak Dev. So they are very sacred to Sikh pilgrims in India and across the world. But because of the India-Pakistan partition, the two Gurudwaras fell in two different countries. Because of the tensions and the wars and conflicts between them, the Sikh pilgrims could never easily cross over. They could never visit Kartarpur easily, though it's just 6 kilometers from the border. You can actually see the shrine, but the travel was not possible. They had to obtain Pakistani visas and adopt a very difficult route. They have to go through a third country because we never had direct flights between India and Pakistan. They had to go to big cities like Islamabad or Karachi, then travel till here, though it is just right across the border. So there was a long-standing demand of the Sikh community to create a travel corridor, a visa-free corridor, through which Pakistan can allow Indian pilgrims, Sikh pilgrims, to pay their respects at Kartarpur. The idea was first concretely proposed by Atal Bihari Vajpayee during his visit to Pakistan, along with Nawaz Sharif. During this historic visit of Prime Minister Vajpayee in 1999, the idea of a visa-free corridor was taken up, but it was never implemented. But recently, to mark the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev, India and Pakistan took this initiative finally, a major cultural diplomacy initiative. Prime Minister Modi and then Prime Minister Imran Khan laid the foundation of the Kartarpur Corridor. It was built within a year and inaugurated in 2019. So this corridor, which is roughly 6 kilometers long, it's a visa-free corridor for religious purposes. It's open only for Indian pilgrims. Is that clear? It's not a two-way corridor. Pakistanis can't travel to India through this corridor. It's only for Sikh pilgrims, Indian pilgrims. They need to apply, register on the MEA's website. And once the list is passed on to Pakistan, Pakistan issues a travel document. So those pilgrims can travel through this visa-free corridor. It gives a one-day access. And you are basically transferred here from Indian immigration to Pakistani immigration, and you're allowed to visit the site, spend some time, and you have to come back on the same day. This visa-free travel arrangement was created to protect and enable the religious rights of the Sikh pilgrims. However, Kartarpur Corridor has been shut. It was shut immediately after its inauguration in few months because of COVID-19, because of all lockdown restrictions. It was reopened, but now because of the tensions, right, and the prevailing relationship between India and Pakistan, the Kartarpur corridor remains shut. That's why Sikh pilgrims now need a visa to visit Pakistan. So Pakistan had issued visas, but India had blocked it. And now India has reversed the decision, which allows Sikh pilgrims to travel to Pakistan with the visas they have obtained. Next topic, the Supreme Court has reminded the investigating agencies that you can't force lawyers to reveal information on their clients. The lawyer client privilege cannot be broken. It's a fundamental right. It's a breach of fundamental right if, let's say, police are forcing the lawyer of the accused to reveal information. Now imagine there's an accused who's accused of committing a murder, right? And there's a lawyer representing the client. And what if the police bring the lawyer, force and threaten the lawyer to reveal what the client has said, and they try to use it against the accused? So this has been noted in case of several incidents in India. The Supreme Court has taken this matter very seriously. It has clearly reminded the investigating agencies, be it the central law enforcement agencies or the police, the state police, that you can't force your client's lawyer, the lawyer of the accused, to reveal information which the client has confided in the lawyer. Because the lawyer client privilege is sacrosanct. In fact, there is a constitutional guarantee under Article 20 of the Indian Constitution, probably one of the most important articles, one of the most important fundamental rights. It provides protection from ex post facto law. That's one of the clauses under Article 20, meaning you can be punished only for an offense which is treated as an offense under a law which was in existence at that point when the crime was committed. Now, you can't be punished for a crime that was committed before a law was passed regarding that. Or your punishment can't be changed because some changes were made in the future for the legal changes that was done. So ex post facto changes in law will not apply to crimes that were committed before. So your punishment for a crime will only be according to the law that was in existence at that point in time. The punishment will be in accordance with that as well. So this is one of the key provisions. The second provision against double jeopardy. A person cannot be prosecuted and punished for the same offense twice. You can't be held guilty and punished for the same offense twice. So this is double jeopardy, and the Constitution provides protection against this. And the third one, very important, Article 20, Clause 3, protection against self-incrimination. Why do you think with self-witness or accused, what do you say, the confession is not seen as credible proof to achieve conviction? Confession alone is not enough because confession can be achieved even through coercion, through threats and torture. So Indians will enjoy, not just Indians, it's a right available to foreigners as well. It's a fundamental right against self-incrimination, meaning you can't be forced by the police to give a witness against yourself. You can't be forced to give a confession. Now, let's say the accused has confided something personal with the lawyer, which has an implication for the ongoing case. Now, what if the police threaten the lawyer, intimidate the lawyer, coerce the lawyer to reveal that information and use it to achieve conviction of the accused? Isn't that an indirect violation of the constitutional right against self-incrimination? That's what the Supreme Court has clearly pointed out. The Supreme Court has said this will be an outrageous breach of the constitutional fundamental right against self incrimination. You can't force the lawyers, threaten them, coerce them to reveal information on their client. It's a violation of the Article 19 provision and Article 21 provision of the lawyer as well. Because lawyers have a right to free speech and expression, which has the right to remain silent. Client has a right to remain silent as well. So these fundamental rights will stand violated if lawyer-client relationship is breached by the police. The Advocates Act of 1961 provides statutory protection for lawyer-client privilege. Lawyer-client information that is exchanged between them is a matter of privilege, which has statutory recognition under the Advocates Act and also under Section 132 of Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam, which has replaced the Indian Evidence Act. So what the client tells the lawyer, the defendant tells the lawyer, cannot be used with the police. They can't extract this and use it in the case to achieve conviction. So this is the important point you need to note down. But however, this privilege has an exception. It can be waived off under two circumstances. The lawyer-client privilege can be waived off. When the client has approved it. When the accused gives consent that yes, my lawyer can share this information with the police and the prosecution, then yes, it can be violated. Or if there is a reasonable doubt that the lawyer client relationship could lead to a further crime or a fraud being committed. So to prevent a future crime from occurring, a future fraud from being committed, then lawyer client privilege can be violated by the police. But or else, police can't bring the lawyer of the defendant and threaten them to reveal information and use it for conviction. This is against the fundamental right guaranteed under Article 20, Clause 3. Next, Indian Railways is patronizing the Aabhar online store platform to promote local artisans, handicrafts, and local handlooms, to promote the rich heritage, the art and culture of India. There is a program, the One District, One Product initiative, to promote GI products in particular. The government has been encouraging local artisans, local industries, handicrafts, and handlooms to promote their unique products from one place to another, where each district can promote its flagship product, and especially GI tag products, which are linked to a specific location. They are being actively promoted by the government. Then Railways also has one railway station, one product scheme, the OROP scheme. One station, one product scheme, where at each railway station, indigenous products by tribal communities, local artisans, they are being promoted and sold to create livelihood and economic opportunities for the artisans. So now, Railways is taking this initiative online. On the GEM platform, the government e-marketplace. GEM, it's an online portal. It's like your government version of e-commerce, just like you have Amazon, Flipkart, etc., right, where you all order products. Similarly, for government procurement, right, there is a government online marketplace, the GEM, government e-marketplace. On this platform, the Aabhar online store would be listed, which will have a collection of exquisite gifts, handloom products, and artisanal products, which are made by indigenous tribes and communities, local artisans, and local mills and handlooms and handicraft industries. So it will procure from all the handloom handicraft emporiums run by state governments and central government. It will procure from Khadi and Village Industries Commission, Central Cottage Industries Emporium, and it will try to market and sell these products to create economic livelihood opportunities for our local artisans. Next, the Indian Navy is going to hold three important events next year. In 2026, three flagship events are being hosted by the Indian Navy. And this is mentioned in an article on page number 10 by Vice Admiral of the Indian Navy. So he has said that Indian Navy keeps a close watch on every Chinese vessel entering the Indian Ocean, because Chinese spy vessels like Yongbong 5, they keep making an entry into the Indian Ocean to spy on India, to carry out surveillance on India. Then PLA Navy ships and even submarines, they keep entering the Indian Ocean, which poses a significant threat to India. So Indian Navy constantly monitors China's naval activities. So while making this statement, the naval officer has highlighted the three important high profile events that India is going to be hosting next year: the International Fleet Review, then Naval Exercise Milan, and Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. These are three flagship events organized by the Indian Navy. So, what is the International Fleet Review? So, in a fleet review, naval ships are displayed and paraded in front of the president, where the president takes the guard of honor. And it's not just Indian Navy which will parade its vessels and fleet in front of the president. Foreign navies are also invited to take part in the fleet review. So it's largely a ceremonial event that we started in 2001. Since then, periodically, International Fleet Review is held. Friendly navies, foreign navies are invited to participate and display their warships as well when the President of India takes the guard of honor. So it's a initiative to build closer ties and softer or cultural ties between the navies of friendly nations. Then multilateral naval exercise Milan. This is the biggest naval exercise organized by India. Milan exercise started in 1995 when we invited Indonesia, Singapore from Southeast Asia, and even Thailand and Sri Lanka. These four navies were invited by Indian Navy to start the Milan exercise, and today it has rapidly expanded. More than 40 countries are participating now in the Milan exercise, from Vietnam to France to US and Russia. Multiple nations have been participating in the Milan exercise, which is organized by Indian Navy. Please make a note. Milan exercise is a multilateral naval exercise organized by Indian Navy. Then finally, IONS. UPSC has already asked a prelims question on this topic. See, some of you might be wondering, why do we spend so much time on the newspaper? Why do we carry out such in-depth analysis? But you tell me, don't you think if you cover all these topics in roughly 75 to 90 minutes, don't you think it's worth your time and effort? Because almost every single subject, every single development can be covered, and direct questions come from what we discuss. IONS is a topic which UPSC has already asked. So please note the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. It's again an initiative of the Indian Navy. It's a conclave, it's a conference that we started organizing from 2008 onwards. So Indian Navy brings together the chiefs of the foreign navies that are friendly to India. Mainly the littoral states of Indian Ocean are invited. So countries like Australia, for example, Singapore, then Maldives, all these littorals, the rim states of Indian Ocean, their navies are invited to participate in the conclave. So 25 member states are part of it with 9 observer nations, and it's a biennial event organized once in 2 years. So the next edition will be hosted by India. Yeah, so these three high profile naval events will be held at Vishakhapatnam in 2026. Coming to the last topic, there's an article under the economy, the business section that refers to Global Semiconductor Alliance. The India Cellular and Electronics Association, they have entered into an agreement with Global Semiconductors Alliance to promote the manufacturing of semiconductor chips in India. Is that clear? That's the development. Now, what is this Global Semiconductor Alliance? Based on this, you can expect a prelims question. Global Semiconductor Alliance is a not for profit trade organization. It's a non state entity. It's an industry alliance. The major semiconductor manufacturers of the world and the major electronic giants of the world, all these companies have formed this global alliance. It's based out of the US. It was founded in the United States. It's an industry association. Like, for example, how we have the CII or ASSOCHAM. These are industry associations of Indian industries. Similarly, the major semiconductor manufacturers, electronic giants of the world, they have a global semiconductor alliance. All the top companies are part of it, from Intel to Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, and all the other big tech giants and semiconductor manufacturers. They're all part of this industry alliance. So the Indian association that deals with mobiles and cellular connectivity and electronics, the ICEA, they have signed an agreement with the Global Semiconductor Alliance to transform India into a semiconductor hub and an electronics hub. So you might see big investments coming out of this partnership. So please note down, what is the Global Semiconductor Alliance? So this ends my discussion for today. We have covered all the key topics. I hope you have understood everything. And if you benefited from the session, do support us with your likes and comments. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.